My name is Rachel Cushman. I'm an enrolled member of Chinook Indian Nation, and I'm a councilwoman for Chinook Indian Nation. I do a lot of different things, sit on a lot of different committees, but mostly it's really working on communication with members, with external folks, whether it be through public speaking and education, to working with our legal team, to working with different universities. So I'm just in the process of releasing a chapter for a book on the politics of the canoe and the different aspects of cultural revitalization and reciprocity and stuff like that. So I do a lot of different, I wear a lot of different hats, but mostly it's just maintaining communication and making sure that we're being as transparent as possible with our membership.
Great.
I do a lot of public speaking. So I've visited a couple weeks ago. I was at Atlanta University. I've spoken here. I have gone to high schools. I visited Lewis and Clark Law School and spoke there. So a lot of it is like educating folks on tribal recognition and the complications of it. I started out as environmental sciences.
Got it.
Because I worked in the sciences. I worked for the Bureau of Indian Affairs Northwest Region office under the fisheries biologist there, Columbia Intertribal Fish Commission, working with different tribes on restoration projects, and I actually thought I was going to be a major fish biologist. And then I came to the University of Oregon and started in the sciences, and I quickly learned that Western science is not for me, that they did not incorporate indigenous ways of knowing and management, that everything was compartmentalized, that they didn't look at the broader picture, they just looked at little specific instances, and it really bothered me. And it was in a biology class. We were talking about ecology, and she was focusing on one aspect of it. I'm like, well, you can't talk about stream restoration without talking about fire suppression and all these other things. And she's like, well, yes, I can. And those things don't matter to one another. I'm like, actually, in the bigger picture, they do. That's why they call it a web. And so I took a class with Beth Paito. She was a visiting professor here, and she taught Indigenous Women's Leaders class. And I fell in love, and that's when ethnic studies at that point in time was still a program. So I took her class, and then I took a couple more. I took her class on, it was not Native related, but it was on New Orleans, pre-Katrina, during Katrina, post-Katrina, and my first freshman year of college was actually when Katrina hit. In 2005, the fall. And so we talked about the implications of race and racial politics in regards to Katrina, and I was like, this stuff is dope. I think at that point in time, I was either an officer for NASU, or I was the co-director at the Multicultural Center at the time. And so a bunch of us started working on different projects on campus. And so I don't know if you've ever heard about the 4 demands, which is what I worked on the whole time that I was a student, was to departmentalize ethnic studies, to create diversity plans across campus, to create a queer studies track, and to give teeth to the bias response team, so make it so that they can actually combat bias on campus. Bias response team doesn't exist anymore, but for a while it did, and through all of our student organizing, we actually accomplished all 4 of those plans. I think it was my junior year that we finally departmentalized ethnic studies, and that's really actually was a catalyst for, you know, the creation of the queer studies minor, and then eventually to create the Native Studies program, which is really exciting. Now the new indigenous race and ethnicity department that has come out of that is amazing. Oh, I experienced quite a few. So I was first generation college student. My parents didn't know the difference between an associate's, a bachelor's, master's, anything like that. They've learned since. But dealing with the finances by myself was difficult. When I originally was going off to college, I had applied to a lot of universities and a lot of scholarships, and I received the Gates Millennium Scholarship, and because of my tribal standing, I received it, and then they sent me a letter saying, oh, sorry, we made a mistake, and you no longer qualify. Because I don't know if you know, Chineke Indian Nation is not federally recognized.
Oh, okay.
Which, since then, they've changed the requirements. It can be a state or federally recognized tribe, and they've changed the blood quantum requirements as well, which is really exciting for all of those who are mixed, because like my children, they're over half Native, and because there's so many tribes, it wouldn't have counted for them because each tribe counts their own blood, and that's what's on the CIBs. I came to college my freshman year completely broke and not knowing what I was doing, took out student loans. There wasn't resources like there is now, like with Calabria Hall. There wasn't specifically a Native retention specialist, which I know that they're in the process of hiring one right now, but there wasn't as many Native American faculty and staff on campus, so it was kind of like going at it blind. And it was really the other students that I met along the way that really helped me through it. I did not actually see an academic advisor until like my third year, which I do not recommend. I recommend definitely going to an academic advisor as soon as possible, because I graduated with like way more credits than necessary and things that did not count towards anything. That was a struggle. For part of my collegiate career, I was homeless, because I had to make the decision: do I buy my books? Do I eat? Do I have a roof over my head? And at the same time, my parents, who had owned their own business prior to me going to college, the economy tanked under the Bush administration, and their business went under, and then my dad got really sick, and so the money I was making, I was heading home. And so it was, couch surfing and trying to make do and being grossly anorexic, and so there was a lot of different struggles. But I think for the most part, like, I grew as a person from it, and I try to do everything in my power today to make sure that youth don't experience the same thing. There's quite a few people that I've known along the way that, over the years since I graduated, since I graduated, I went and worked at Portland State for a while and worked with the students there to make sure that they weren't falling through the cracks. And then since moving back to Eugene, to be with my husband and have our family, I've known a lot of students over there, and I'm like, you hungry? I'll feed you. And there was, this year I haven't come to the Longhouse as much. I think I've only been a couple of times this year, which is bad on my part, but typically for the last 5 years before this year, I would make a giant meal every week and take it there. I was raised my whole life by my great-grandfather, my grandfather, my mother, to know who I am and where I come from. So Chineke Indian Nation isn't federally recognized. So that means that for multiple generations, we have been fighting a battle with the federal government on them recognizing our treaty rights, respecting our Aboriginal heritage, amongst plethora, not harming our children and our elders, because things like the Indian Child Welfare Act don't apply to us. And so my mom specifically had me going to council meetings, had me in leadership programs, really advocated for me, and put a lot of her faith into me, to be a leader and to keep the torch going. Because, you know, after 5 decades or so of fighting a battle, you get exhausted, so you have to replace yourself. And so that's what I am. I'm, you know, there's an older generation that is so tired of fighting. And so, you know, as a young person, I feel like it's my obligation to my family, to my people, to keep that going. And so that's all I've known my whole life, is that, you know, you got to make the world a better place. You got to stand up for the little people, and you know, you got to know as much as possible to keep your endurance going and to have a legit voice at the table. So something exciting, on April 8th, we closed the purchase of our treaty grounds, and something really awesome about that is that they're pretty much untouched. They've been in a family's possession for a long time, and so one of the things that we're going to do with that land, we're gonna of course use the space. We're kind of trying to determine how we're going to use the space, whether it's going to have a playing house or other features there for use, for actual human use, and then also for restoration of the land itself. So there's the Tansy Creek bed that needs restored, vegetation, taking out invasive species. Also, it's, you know, the lands around it, you know, and just making that ecosystem viable. And so my work in the sciences really helps me make informed decisions, as well as know the people who to talk to, being like, hey, we need a fisheries biologist, can you help out? Or I need an ethnobotanist, can you help out here? And so I still maintain all of those relationships that I made over the years, and so it's really helpful.
Yeah.
Like in any type of leadership position, who you know and how to think strategically, and so it's really been beneficial. And actually, I don't know, maybe as I get older, I don't know where my next steps are going. I was looking at the doctorate program that they just developed, or it's going to be launching year after next, and that looks exciting. But my heart has always been in natural resources, and who knows, this might be when tribes are really recognized. I'll be like, let's start the natural resource department.
Yeah.
What can we do there?
Okay.
So I live here in Eugene.
Oh, okay.
I do a lot of commuting. I'm based here. My first and most important job is being a mom. I have 2 kids, preschool and kindergarten, going into, my oldest is going into 1st grade next year, which is a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
And really, I have a lot of different hats that I wear. So I do the tribal government stuff, and then I also sit on a lot of different educational boards, early education all the way through college. And then I also started a nonprofit organization that's based out of Portland. So I do a lot of commuting, but most of my work is done from home.
Okay.
You know, they hear their mom talk constantly, and I think that's mostly what it is. It's like, I'll let them choose the direction they want in life. Like my mom did me and my siblings. I was the one who latched on to this stuff. My other siblings, not so much. But I think the most important thing for my children is to know who they are and where they come from. And so they're constantly hearing their mom talk about federal Indian policy and tradition and stories about, you know, since contact, prior to contact, post contact, you know. And so that's how I know a lot of the stuff that I know. People are like, oh my gosh, how do you know so much of this? I'm like, because I sat and listened to people talk as a child, and you know, I asked questions, and some of them were like really, really funny questions, like sitting in a tribal council meeting or an Alaudes meeting, and hearing people bicker about, you know, whatever topic. And human nature is to be right, or to have authority over whatever and whatever topic, and some people would be like saying the same thing but in a different way, and they'd be arguing, and I'd be like, why are they saying the same thing again? And she would be like, she's like, just listen, I know it can be boring sometimes, but at least you can say that you were there. And now as an adult, there have been instances where I'm the only person in the room who is there, or one other person was in the room who was there, who was in their 80s, and I'm talking to them, and and it also builds a trust within my community that people are like, I know that when Rachel says something, that she actually knows what she's talking about. On council, not so much.
Got it.
In other careers and stuff, yes. So on council, it's half women, half men, and we have a certain respect in our community, and we also so gender is something that is treated different in my community than is in the dominant world around us. So in our language, we don't have pronouns, and so traditionally how you would be treated is there would be no difference between the man and the woman, and a lot of our chiefs were women, and it wasn't until contact that really changed, because fur trappers didn't want to talk to the women, they wanted to talk to the guys, and so a lot of more men came into leadership positions within the tribal communities, but without the pronouns, your place and what you did in society was based on your job. And that's how we still, treat it. Every person's job in our community is important. Whether they're a real estate agent, how can they help with that experience? Whether they're a fisherman or an oyster picker, how can they help with that experience? If they've got grant writing skills, how can they help? And it's not one job is more important than another, because they all are contributing into the community, and so that's important. In the dominant society, though, that's a completely different story. As a young professional, there have been several instances where I have experienced gendered inequality. When I graduated from the University of Oregon, I got hired as the manager of the Native American Student Community Center, NASCC, at Portland State University, PSU. While I really enjoyed my work, students, and many of my colleagues at PSU and the NACC, there were aspects of the job that weren't as pleasant. When I got hired, it was just after a major shift in the department's structure. A Native faculty member had been working on acquiring the title of director of the NASCC, but the executive director of Diversity and Multicultural Student Services, as well as the NACC Advisory Council, decided to go in a different direction. I was hired, and I believe that really upset this person. For some time, this person did everything in his power to make me feel uncomfortable and devalued as a colleague. He was dismissive of my work. He often would approach me like I was his administrative assistant, telling me to make copies for him. He would tell other colleagues inaccurate information and make me look bad. He often treated me like I had no knowledge of the indigenous communities of Oregon and the Pacific Northwest, even though I'm an indigenous person of the area. I won't go into too much detail for privacy and professional reasons, but I ended up filing a bullying and harassment claim with my union against this individual and someone else he worked with whom he had pitted against me. This person was not my supervisor, nor in the same division, but being a faculty member, he had power over me, and he tried to use it as often as possible. This is toxic masculinity. Native men can be perpetrators of toxic masculinity as much as their non-Native peers. It wasn't just men, though, that perpetuated gender inequality. I had a female supervisor, non-Native, that made my life extremely difficult at PSU. She wasn't my supervisor for very long, but her behavior is one of the reasons I ultimately decided to leave PSU. Long story short, I had my son in the last year that I worked there. I was very adamant about exclusively breastfeeding, and she did everything in her power to make it so that it was difficult for me to do that. I'm not going to too much detail. I don't know why a woman would do that to another woman, but I wasn't the only person that she did that to. The behavior has been repeated since. The reason I'm not going to go into too much detail with this is because of some great advice I received from my mother-in-law. She's a Native woman leader in Oregon education. She has worked at the University of Oregon as well as Oregon State University. She currently is the chair of the President's Diversity Action Council at the University of Oregon. Anyway, she told me that I should always be the bigger person. She said, "Don't make a big stink. Don't give them any legitimate reason to give you a bad review. Walk away gracefully and do something better." I feel that I did that. I decided to turn my bad experience into something positive. A friend and I co-founded the Oregon Intertribal Breastfeeding Coalition. We both felt that we did not have the support we needed as breastfeeding Native mothers, so we decided to create that support. The organization's mission is to redefine unity, to promote, educate, support, and respect our diverse Native American community in Oregon, reclaiming breastfeeding and our first foods. One of the biggest issues right now for me, obviously, is federal recognition, because of the implications of, being a federally recognized tribe versus a non-federally recognized tribe, and all of the discrepancies between rights and whatnot. So that is one of my biggest issues that I work on and care about deeply. I also really, that's what I'm focusing a lot of my time on cultural revitalization, language revitalization. So making sure that, our language maintains and our culture maintains, and really language, the culture, the federal recognition, all really encompasses the environmental work as well, the ecological work, because being Chinook means, so there were many Chinookan tribes. The five most western are the Clatsop, the Kathlamet, the Willapa, the Wakayakum, and the Lower Chinook. But what makes a Chinook person all the way up the Columbia River was the language. But what makes the five most western is that territory, is that physical territory. So from Oak Point all the way to the mouth of Columbia, down the Oregon coastline, up the Washington coastline, and having the relations to the language, the words to describe the area that we're from, to the stories, that how those places were created, to really understand how that land had been, how we had been stewards of it for over 10,000 years. And so it's all encompassing. So in the only way that we can actually express our sovereignty and to have a say over what happens to that land and to that ecosystem is through federal recognition and the ratification of our treaties. So far I have a couple of different things, the achievements that really are important to me. So the purchase of Tansy Point, which is our treaty signing grounds, that we signed our treaty August 9th, 1851. This August will be 168 years since the signing, which my family were signers of that, and actually chiefs in the village right there. So that's a really big deal to me. And being a part of that is really exciting, and planning the Treaty Day celebration is really exciting. It was a team effort. Everybody did their part. We had, just an amazing team of people working on that. And then also, we have a lawsuit that we filed in August. It'll be 2 years since we filed. Yeah. 2 years since we filed our lawsuit against the federal government. And working with this amazing legal team has actually inspired me. One of the things that might be a future endeavor is law school. Working on this lawsuit, it started off with meeting with the legal team and learning all this legal jargon and the processes, and I was learning from amazing people who've been lawyers for decades now, who have all this experience and knowledge to pass down. And so I got to work on looking over all the different drafts of the case before we actually submitted it to the courts, and then meeting after we submitted it to the courts and learning about the judges and then all the process and going and actually participating in oral arguments and so we've made it pretty far in the court case. Being 2 years, legal system takes forever. Nothing happens in a minute. It's been awesome to be a part of it because we've come so far. We've gotten so much support. And part of this started before I came on to tribal council, was that we worked with a documentary crew, and we created a documentary. It's called Promised Land, and I go to universities, museums, places all over the place, sitting as a panel member to discuss the film. That was one of the things that the film crew really wanted, was that it's not just going to go and stream on Netflix for anybody to watch or whatever, but people are going to have interactions with the tribal members. So we go, or the tribal leadership, and so we've gone to DC, we've gone up and down the West Coast, we go a lot of places having great conversations, and from that we get so much more support. Why communications is so important, that actually over $75,000 of the dollars that went to the purchase of Tansy Point came from individual donations, which is a pretty big deal. So being part of that, being part of the legal team, and being able to just talk interchangeably about each of those things is really, really great. And then also getting the opportunity to write and publish and talk about what I'm passionate about. I started it last year. I co-wrote a chapter in a book called Politics of the Canoe, and my chapter is called This Is What Makes Us Strong, and it's about canoe revitalization and canoe culture, specifically looking at it from looking at tribal journeys and looking at it from a Chinook perspective, and using narrative to, we talk about policy, and we talk about a lot of like academic terms and stuff, but also part of what my skill set is creating narrative, telling a story, making it personable. And that's what I do at a lot of these public speaking events. I'm like, give them stories. How does that make you feel, and how can you relate to that, or something that's relatable?